Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments, such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org.
Look, we know budget meetings can be dull, but that's exactly what this year's Idaho legislative session has been all about. We break down the latest budget moves, plus all of the week's news from the State House on our Legislative Roundup newsletter. Kick off your Monday with our recap by subscribing at boisestatepublicradio.org.
You're listening to Idaho Matters from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Gaudette. Since conflict in Iran began February 28th, gas prices have shot up in Idaho an alarming 76 cents. Now, instability in the Middle East and then threats to the shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz has caused oil prices to yo-yo up and down, literally bouncing from $95 a barrel to $117 a barrel, back down to $85. Matthew Condi has had a very busy 18 days. He is the Public and Government Affairs Director of AAA Idaho, and it's his job to watch gas prices and then help all of us try to understand what's going on. So Matthew is back with us today to talk more about this. Matthew, really nice having you back on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Busy times.
It certainly is. Okay, so before we really get into the numbers, why are gas prices going up in Idaho and around the country? I mean, is it because we get our oil from Iran? And if not, then why are those prices spiking?
So a good way of looking at it is just like a human under stress, the heart rate goes up when things get exciting. And right now, with the situation in the Middle East, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing crude oil prices off the charts, and we're seeing gas prices follow that. Obviously, crude oil makes up about 50 to 60% of the cost of gas to the end user. So anytime that crude oil moves, it's going to have a big impact down at the pump. Unfortunately, even though we don't receive supply from Iran, there are big customers who do. China and India, each with 1 billion people. And so when they can't get their product from them, they compete for product that others are producing. And so any strain anywhere in the system can cause real pressure for everybody.
And I know that you've been reporting on the jumps in the gas prices over these last 18 days. Can you talk to us about what the average price of gas is right now here in Idaho? And I should note that you literally just reported this morning that the price shot up again overnight by 10 cents.
It's been crazy. You know, normally we send out a weekly update to let people know what's going on. And now every day or two, I need to send out a new one because that's where we're at. But right now we're at $3.79 a gallon, both for the state average and the national average. For context, compared to 18 days ago, let's just look at February 27th as a point of reference. The state average is up 83 cents. The national average is up 81 cents. And we're 61 cents higher than a year ago here in Idaho. So certainly you get in the morning, and if you're like me, you go straight to the information, and lo and behold, a 10-cent jump, as you mentioned, overnight. And then here in the Treasure Valley, actually 14 cents. Same with Coeur d'Alene. And in Lewiston, they jumped 17 cents. And that's just overnight. So we are not letting up. And if we were looking at 14th place in the country for the most expensive fuel yesterday, now we're at 11th. So we are continuing to surge forward pretty dramatically, I would say.
So can we talk about the Treasure Valley a little bit more? Because you have said that the Treasure Valley has truly felt the pinch, same as Coeur d'Alene. But here in the Treasure Valley, gas prices, my understanding is there was one point where it spiked 21 cents in a single day. So this just seems to be, and as you said last night, 14 more cents. So are you unfortunately thinking that we're going to continue to see these spikes happening in the near future?
Well, unfortunately, there's nothing that tells us that pump prices are going to change course anytime soon. We already have one state above the $5 mark. That's California, over $5.50 right now. Washington and Hawaii will probably be there by the end of the day. And 7 states have already topped the $4 mark. So, as we've done a survey on this subject back in 2022, this was the last major time we saw these surging prices with Russia attacking Ukraine. And the research we found said that 59% of people will change their driving habits when it hits the $4 mark, and 75% will change it at the $5 mark. So right now, we're kind of careening towards that $4 mark here in Idaho and nationally. And if we do, it's gonna put a real crimp in some people's travel plans. But for now,
Hmm.
we think the majority of people will still make good on their spring break and hope for better days ahead.
So, can we talk about the stability in the Strait of Hormuz? I mean, why is that so important to future gas prices? And I ask that question because sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around what is happening in the Middle East because it does sometimes feel so separate from our day-to-day lives.
That's a great point. And we see things happening on the other side of the world and don't necessarily know that there's a profound interconnection amongst us all now. Global economies are very tied together. And the crude oil price right now is trending towards $96 per barrel. For context, it was trading at about $63 a month ago. So $33 jump in a month. In the Strait of Hormuz, you've got 20% of the world's crude supply going through there. Big customers depend on that very heavily. Places like China and Japan, they get almost exclusively their supply coming through there. So, without the ability to move that product, it has created intense pressure everywhere. You couple that with some other things that are down the pike, things like warmer weather in the northern hemisphere. Now all of a sudden you have more demand coming, and there's
Mhm.
always that potential as we make the switch down the line here in a month or so by summer blend fuel, where it's a little bit more expensive to produce anyway, just because it has those additives in it. It prevents it from evaporating at higher temperatures. Well, if that does happen, then you've got more demand side pressure, more supply side pressure. It can be a real perfect storm of harm for a lot of folks out there.
Okay, so even if then the Iran conflict calms down, does that mean that our gas prices may not necessarily come down to the point that they've been because we're getting into that time of year where we're going to switch to that summer blend of gasoline?
Well, I think the thing to keep our eye on will be the crude oil situation. Right now, as high as it is, every time that somebody has to pay that price, it's going to make its way down to the end user, like we said. And so
Hmm.
until you see those prices start to relax, get back down into, say, the $80, $70 range, something like that, things may ease off. They may even reverse course here in the next month or two, depending on how long this conflict is drawn out. But all the supply that's been paid for at that higher price, it has to clear the system before those wholesalers, those retailers are going to start bringing those prices back down. If there's a ton of demand that kind of meets it in the middle, you may have kind of a balancing point where supply is bringing pressure back down, but demand's bringing it back up, and we achieve some kind of an equilibrium that's cheaper where we are today, but still not where we were in the wintertime.
I want to go back to something you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, and this is the jump when it comes to most expensive gas. So you said we're sitting at 11th right now, but I believe at the beginning of March we were 31st in the country for the most expensive gasoline. So do we know why we've jumped so much so fast in these rankings?
Yeah, so what happens, Gemma, is we see Idaho generally the one of the last to get out of the gate when there's a dramatic change in gas prices. So if it starts to spike, that generally happens in other parts of the country first. If it starts to drop off dramatically, the same thing. So we tend to lag behind. I almost describe us as the caboose at the end of the train. When that rest of the train makes it around the corner, we're going to get there eventually, but it's going to take time to build up to that. And so that's what we're starting to see now, where that gap has narrowed and we've caught up to everybody else. But really, it was a foot race, and a lot of these states surged forward dramatically in pump prices. We were one of the last to react, but now we're there with everybody else. Normally, Idaho ends up somewhere in the seventh to ninth place range for most expensive gas. And as I say, it wasn't that things were so good for us that we fell to 31st. It's really more that others surged past us and left us in the dust at 31st, which we would have been happy to stay there, quite frankly, but unfortunately not. We're right there in the pack with everybody else.
Okay, so before I let you go, I do want to see if there's anything folks can do to maybe ease that pain at the pump. So let's talk about something, which, I mean, is this fact or myth? Does slowing down the highway actually help?
Absolutely, it does. So the peak efficiency for many vehicles is right around 50 miles per hour. From then on, as you increase speed, you start to tail off in fuel efficiency. So if you're in a situation where you typically are traveling maybe a little faster than the speed limit, let's say, maybe you're at 70 or 75. If you drop down closer to 65, you could save around 14% on your fuel efficiency. There's other things you can do as well, like making sure your tires are properly inflated, only using the fuel that you need. Remember, if your manual says that a certain thing is required, that's it. So if only regular is required, you can get by with regular. You don't need to go to the plus or the premium product. So that's something. And then also taking anything heavy off the roof rack or out of the trunk you don't need. Those things can be creating some drag and some extra weight that are limiting your ability to get the best there too. Last thing, of course, those fuel rewards points. If you're shopping at particular stores using a certain credit card, you may be able to rack up those rewards points that help you get some nice discounts at your normal purchases and then in turn at the pump.
Well, as always, Matthew, we so appreciate you coming in. I mean, this is definitely a busy time for you, and I know so many people are watching, and they're also concerned about these rising gas prices. So appreciate your time today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We've been talking with Matthew Condi. He is the Public and Government Affairs Director of AAA Idaho, and we've been talking about the spike in gas prices since the conflict in Iran began. And thanks so much for listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. Do you have thoughts about today's episode? Make sure you email us at idahomatters@boisestate.edu or reach out on our socials. If this podcast has become a part of your routine, can you tap 5 stars and leave us a review? It helps us stand out.
How's everybody doing? You guys all right?
Boise State Public Radio and Duck Club Entertainment present the Charlie Hunter Trio.
Charlie Hunter, ladies and gentlemen.
Wednesday, March 18th at the Shrine Social Club in Boise. Blending jazz, funk, blues, and rock. Hunter is a guitarist, producer, and bandleader who will present his unique finger-picking technique on custom hybrid guitars. Tickets are available now at theduckclub.com.